Hello, people of YouTube and of the podcast sphere. Welcome to Spectator Diff, an Overwatch League podcast, an esports podcast from the two most underpaid spectators probably in the Overwatch League. My name is Brad. Matt is over in that box over there, and we decided to start a podcast because we have opinions about Overwatch, and gosh darn it, someone needs to hear them. So here's the deal. Every week we will be here live on YouTube and eventually on Spotify, but live here on YouTube at 12:30 Eastern and sometimes Pacific because we're not that consistent. We're gonna cover some major headlines for you, break down a match of the week, hit you with some predictions, and then get the hell out of here. And yeah, that's the gist. You can catch us everywhere you consume podcasts and all of that audio fun stuff. So go download, subscribe, all that fun stuff. And while you're here, if you're here on YouTube, please interact with our content. Leave us a like, leave us a comment. We may read them on the air, and hit us with a subscribe so that you can catch us when we go live here every single week. With that said, I'm trying to do these intros a little bit shorter now so that we're not spending so much time talking. With that said, let's get right into the headlines because there are not very many of them. And yeah, Matt, kick us off.
Look at it, man. Episode 7, and we're like trimming it down like a real podcast.
Trim the fat. Trimming the fat. All right. Hey, speaking of trimming the fat, Boston did so. They've parted ways with their head coach, Lori. This comes after the uprising assistant coach, Barrio, left the team last week. As far as I can tell, that now means the only coach for the Boston Uprising, and according to this article that I'm reading, the only coach left for the Boston Uprising is Askoft, who was an assistant coach as of a few minutes ago when they dropped Lori, or actually I think they dropped Lori last week. So about a week ago when they dropped Lori, Askoft moving into the head coach position. No word yet on whether or not Boston will hire anybody else. Brad, Boston drops their head coach after picking up Mag and then playing Punk. What's up with Boston? I'm gonna go with funding. I'm gonna go funding for 500, Matt. This is just the consistency with most of the Overwatch League right now. The league is kind of on fire and has been smoldering for, at the very least, the last 2 months. We're just seeing results of that. Most of these teams are gearing up for the launch of Overwatch 2. People are saying it's the end of the league. That's incorrect. The league will continue. It will continue to be okay and hopefully thrive in less than 30 days. Less than 30 days right now from until the glorious Overwatch 2. As far as Boston is concerned specifically, you know, they are sorting out their nonsense. I'm glad they have maybe changed the head coaching position, because let's talk about this for a second. For the last, 3 weeks now, they've been playing Mag instead of Punk, who Punk had proven to be the better Junker Queen player. And lo and behold, they lost every single game with Mag and then won against Vancouver this weekend when once again they played Punk. So Punk is no longer in the Shadow Realm. I'm going to call that a coaching diff. Yeah, so I think, you know, net positive probably has to do mainly with funding, but what are you going to do?
Yeah, I think all of that sounds pretty legit. I mean, I'm looking at Boston's roster right now, and Boston has a team that should be doing better than Boston is, just to call it what it is. Like, you've got Punk, Valentine, Faith, Victoria, MCD, Crimzo, and Mag. And you also have Itzel and Seeker, who have a little bit less of a resume from the league. So, I mean, Boston should probably be playing better than Boston has been playing, and hopefully some back office changes will help them move forward. Next thing on the headlines this week, Overwatch 2 coming to Xbox Game Pass. Maybe. Okay, this is kind of weird. According to a press release from Microsoft talking about the Blizzard acquisition, they have said they look forward to bringing Blizzard's full catalog of games to Xbox Game Pass. They said specifically including World of Warcraft and, or not World of Warcraft, I'm sorry, including Overwatch and I don't have the article pulled up in front of me, and now I'm stalling while I pull it up. Diablo and Call of Duty. There it is. 'Is. 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 'Is.
Overwatch is going free to play. Doesn't matter if it's on Game Pass. It's already free. So you can pay for Game Pass to play a free game, or you can just play a free game. Do whatever you want.
My guess is that's going to come with some perks, probably in the Battle Pass department. If you have Game Pass and you're playing Overwatch 2 on Xbox, most likely you'll get like some breaks, and probably just most likely free Battle Pass at that point. Like you just get the Battle Pass for free and get all of those fun extra cosmetics that are coming with what I presume is going to be a premium tier of the Battle Pass.
Yeah,
that would be the most logical conclusion. It seems to be the only reason they would announce it like this, because yeah, it is going free to play for just about everyone. Or Overwatch 2 PvE will likely be free for you if you have Game Pass.
Yeah, that's true. That's
either or. There are a couple ways to frame this, because there have also been rumors that that the PvE is going to be free anyway, which concerns me a little bit, because it sort of implies that the PvE might be staggered release. Like you get little chapters here and there, which is not a good look ultimately. We'll have to see.
Either that or it'll be heavily pay to win, which sucks worse.
Yeah.
If you're releasing a free PvE game, it's not like a PvP game where you can make your revenue for microtransactions on cosmetics. If it's PvE, you got to gatekeep some of that stuff to make money off it. So I don't know. I think that if I had to guess what this really is this is somebody at Microsoft saying Blizzard words in a press release and not really understanding how games work. And that's fine. It doesn't matter. Overwatch 2 is going to be free. My last headline of the day is Fox Girl support real? And do we get Fox Girl support on October 4th? We have thought yes, but according to John Spector, maybe not. He noted in a thread under the original leak about this Fox Girl support Kimiko that, quote, yes, this is fake. So, a little backstory. Ever since the last Overwatch 2 release trailer, we all saw a little green ghost fox running around. We knew we were getting a support character on October 4th, and some different Easter eggs on the Kanazaka deathmatch map had people thinking that maybe there was this Fox Girl coming and her name was Kimiko. According to John Spector, that's fake. So now we know nothing about the new player, or the new hero, that we're getting on October 4th, except that it is supposed to be a sport.
So we could dive into this a little bit. There was that leak that was released was a screenshot and a couple of like character models that had been sort of faked to represent the Fox Girl support. So I don't know. It's unclear if Spectre was talking about the fake itself being completely fake, or if we're not getting Fox Girl just yet, or the theme could be that it's not even a fox in general. It's just the ability was a fox related thing. Who knows? Fox Girl, in and of herself, their self, was sort of a fabrication based on that very brief trailer tidbit we got several months back. Obviously, last week we had, well, actually, we didn't, because we weren't invited, but last week, this past weekend, was the Secret Creator conference that we talked about in the news last week. There were photos that were released from a bunch of creators that got together in LA. Looked like a great frickin' time. Still waiting on that invite, Blizzard. Maybe it got lost in my spam folder. I don't know, but my guess is what you should pay attention to at this point is probably the rhetoric coming from your favorite creators that did attend the conference, because while they are all under NDA, between now and the next 4 weeks, I would expect that you will probably hear some different things kind of hinting at what you're going to see come October 4th. I personally cannot wait, because I am so tired of playing Overwatch 1. It's not even funny. Every time I dive into the games after watching the League, it makes me very sad. So
yeah, that is certainly the truth. I'm just getting itchy for Overwatch 2, but I think we all are, and like you said, it's less than 30 days away. So here is your weekly Spectator Diff reminder. Merge your accounts, spend your tokens. merge your accounts, and spend your tokens.
I don't even know if you can really spend tokens. You can get like all of the basic stuff if you don't have it at this point, but now that the event is over, there's nothing new. Like, you can't get any of the event skins anymore, and you can't buy loot boxes. So I keep getting them from my level ups, but you know, the tokens don't get me much of anything anymore, and it makes me sad. Those tokens are gonna go away too. So like,
yeah,
it just seems like Sisyphus pushing a boulder up the hill every single day.
It sure does, but like, here's the thing, right? Find every basic, not unlocked thing that you have. Every voice line, every spray, if you can buy it and you have the tokens for it, buy it, because Blizzard is taking your tokens away, and it's like unspent vacation time at your first shitty job. They're going to keep that, and you're not going to get paid for that time. So use it. Use all your shit. Don't let Blizzard take this from you. Spend your tokens, merge your accounts. And with that, I think that it is time to move on to the game of the week. Unless you want to type out spend your tokens, merge your accounts there real quick.
I just did spend your tokens. I'm not typing out merge your account as well.
There
I'm
you
lazy.
go. I'm gonna give this reminder every week until Overwatch 2 launches. Spend your tokens, merge your accounts.
This has been your Spectator Diff advice column of the week. Moving on to the game of the week. This is my lead this week because
sure is.
Boy howdy, some backstory here. I picked this game on Friday because I was so angry when I watched this live that I could not talk about this. So we are talking about Dallas versus San Francisco, the throw of the century on the part of the now 17-1 San Francisco Shock. The big 20-game winning streak has come to an end, thanks to, and not to detract from Dallas's game here, because they actually did play incredibly well. One of the key takeaways being that this is a completely different Dallas feel than we saw in the prior week against Mayhem. I'm just gonna get this start playing in the background while I talk here and cover some basics. But generally speaking, the Shock and Dallas were playing two completely different games for most of this match. And I mean, I want to give a good shout out to Edison, who played out of his freaking mind for most of this. In fact, I would attribute most of how this game played out to Edison. It seems like Dallas tend to fall back largely on one player almost every single match, and this time it was Edison's time to shine. So congratulations to him. Both teams, excellent alt cycling, some pretty, like, this was a masterclass in like high level Overwatch, all things considered. Like, the fact that I can say Shock through this match, even in general, like, it gave me more of a chance to nitpick than I normally do. So at least, you know, positives here and there. Matt, you watched this live. What do you think?
My overarching thought is that this feels like the first time anybody has held Shock's feet to the fire without telling them beforehand that they're gonna do it. And what I mean by that is, like, every time Shock plays LA, right? Obviously, we've got two of the top, if not the two top teams in NA playing against each other. And it always seems like both teams are kind of just there for the lulz, right? You know, they know each other, they scrim a lot, they know what the looks are going to be, and they know it's really just kind of this, like, hey, we're playing our best buds in Overwatch who are actually at our level, right? I don't think there are many other teams in the league that Shock feels like they need to come out swinging against. And I think that was their big mistake here against Dallas, because Dallas put it to Shock fast and early. And I think that often, I mean, the joke is always Shock can't win control. And I know that mathematically that is kind of dead now, but I think that typically Shock come out on a first match or on a first map, and really gauge how they need to play the next 2 or 3 maps to wrap up a series. And I think typically they can come in and say, wow, this seems like playing pretty well, we should kick it up a notch. I think when they came into Ilios, Dallas put it to them so hard, I don't think they ever really were able to recover. And I know this ends 3-1, Shock get one map here, but Dallas played really, really well this game. I agree, Edison popped off. Sparkle looked really good, but Sparkle's Genji has been immaculate for like 3 years. And yeah, I mean, Shock are just on their heels from minute one, and it shows with every play that they make.
Yeah. So just kicking off this match in general, like I think one of the overarching issues that the Shock had throughout the entire match, and it's going to show pretty early on here, in fact, in the next like 10 to 15 seconds of this gameplay, the Shock over-rotate almost every single fight in this match, and most of the time, it just doesn't work for them. So my problem is, I think what ended up happening, and I could be wrong here, because already, like, this is... We're not even to the point that I have the timestamp that I have in the notes, but this is where it starts. They're already split basically between Dallas. Dallas has surrounded them on the high ground, and they're continuing to push around on Dallas spawn side to point. This is just this is like, to me, seems like they were trying to set the tempo and just not doing a great job at it. It felt miscommunicated at times in a lot of ways. I have it paused. I might as well keep going, because off of this over rotation, like, they get no picks. No one goes down. They're just kind of they're kind of chilling and moving towards point to try and force positioning. They get the cap off, but they're so overextended. Like right here, you can see Proper and Violet are on point. The rest of the team is fighting over near the cage, and I forget who gets picked first here, but the second they cap, like, sure, they get early percentage, whatever. Dallas is unfazed by this, all right? They're just like, okay, they're out of position. Yeah, Kilo goes, and Violet, because he's bouncing around outside the top of point, gets is an easy pick for Sparkle, who's already harassing them as well. Like, they ultimately surround themselves, and it gets them kind of like early outplayed before the fight even kicks off.
Right, and I think one thing that's hard going up against Dallas in this meta is just how good Sparkle is mechanically with Genji. You have to know that if Sparkle has the opportunity to get a dash kill, he's not going to miss those opportunities. It's like, I would put Genji as one of Sparkle's main heroes, and Dallas is so good at doing this tick damage, especially in this comp where they're running the Ashe. They have the burn down from the dynamite, and there's just not enough burst healing from Brig cookies to really protect you if you're about to get dashed. And I think that's one of the places, especially on Ilios, I think that's one of the things that Dallas just really outplayed Shock on. Shock giving up, like you said, those over rotations, allowing themselves to get spread, tick down, and then they're just dash bait for Sparkle.
It's really strange, because this is very uncharacteristic for the Shock in general. They're playing a completely different style, at least from the looks of things on the surface. Maybe it's because Dallas is a better team, and it shows a little bit differently in this circumstance, but it just seems like they're playing completely differently than they normally do. You see them bunched up a lot more. You see them moving quickly to get from point A to point B, but ultimately, like, they're spread thin. They're taking weird positions. Violet doing some weird nonsense the entire map, where he's just like, he's playing high, but also like poking his head out and making it very easy for Edison to just find him consistently. And I'm not really sure. It's impossible to say, like, to expect a team of this caliber to be on 100% of the time. Nobody can do that. So, like, the streak was going to end at some point. Here, it might as well be here, and, like, I have in the notes, like, this is where Proper enters the chat for the first time in the game. It's fine. He's doing Proper things, but, you know, it's almost as if they had to rely on Proper a lot more this time, and even Proper wasn't at his cleanest the entire match. You know, we find, I'll talk about it a little bit more in terms of positioning, especially in the next map, but you know, Proper likes to take these very forward positions anyway as sort of a scouting, early poke damage kind of thing, and then he can dash back to the team when he needs it. But even there, he gets caught out really, really regularly and finds himself overextended and outside of the range of his team. And that comes back to bite them. Again, in the later maps, we'll talk about it more as I go on, because I have a lot of gripes about it. But it's just, there are so many, like, major mistakes that go into play during this match that it's hard to pinpoint one specific thing that goes wrong, but it's a lot of consistent positioning errors and just bad communication from the looks of things.
Yeah, and we said at the beginning of the segment, Edison cannot be discounted.
Correct.
And Edison is just like diffing Kilo's brains out right now. I mean, like, look at the ult differential. Edison's got ult. Kilo isn't even at 60% yet. And I'm assuming that they've already both used ult once at this point in the match. I actually don't remember. But it's just kind of nuts how much more value the Ashe is getting than the Sojourn in this game.
Right. And I'm going to highlight for a second. They don't show the replay here until later, but this is one of many big brain Bob plays that happen. In this case, it happens to favor the Shock, where Finn boops Bob's trajectory off the map as he's being sent to point, which is genius and like just incredible like reaction time and game sense there. Maybe it was an accident, I don't know, but either way, absolutely like giga brain stuff. We'll see another one that favors Dallas in the next map, but like, just, oh my god, it's just one of those like plays you got to stop and appreciate for a second. So that's map 1. Shock scored. They look okay. This is, if you're just seeing this for the first time, you know, you would think the Shock, it's looking like it's going to be a close game, but like nothing too out of the ordinary. Some mistakes here and there. It just starts to fall apart in map 2. And I want to say before we get into this, it took me a while to figure out exactly what was going on here, because the camera angles that they chose to show us, here's the replay of the Bob. Oh my, it's just so good. And goodbye, Robert. It's the camera angles that they chose to show us in a lot of this match did not highlight kind of where things went wrong for the Shock. They would show perspectives from Edison, and that's great, but you know, all of a sudden 3 people would be dead and you couldn't quite figure out what happened. Because looking at it, you wouldn't really be able to tell, because especially on like places like Ruins where there's just stuff in the way everywhere, hard to find where everyone is. That being said, business as usual, starting off this fight. Shock set the pace from the get-go, which is pretty typical. Get an early fight win, very clean. Like I said, business as usual. This is kind of what we expect from the Shock. I don't have a lot to say about this fight. What I do have problems with is this next section where they all take position on the roof of these ruins on the spawn side of Dallas. This, in theory, should work as a strategy, but again, communication and timing is everything, and what ends up happening here is Finn drops early, and Edison finds his cranium, like, almost instantaneously. Like, they drop kind of almost, I think they all drop almost too soon in this case, and they're just grouped up again for Edison to capitalize on that free dynamite damage. And I just don't understand why they continuously do this to themselves, where they're just giving Edison free value.
Yeah, I think there's got to be some sort of communication issue there, right? Because, like, your Brig is never who you want to drop first. If your Brig drops first, she's one of the characters that can't back out. You know, like, if your Genji goes down, your Lucio goes down, even if your Sojourn goes down, you all have movement abilities to retake that high ground. But, like, if your Brig drops first and it goes badly, there's no backing out of that. So that really does make me think that, like, in that instant of, do we go? Somebody said we go and not everybody goed.
Yeah.
And that was a big old issue for Finn, who then, was just like right in Edison's crosshairs.
Great big old goose egg. And then the other thing, another like big mistake just across the board, I don't think Proper did as good of a job as he normally does checking the enemy Genji. In this case, like, I paused it while we were talking and brought it back here. Like, this is one of many examples this time around. They pinged Kilo's position, and then, like, immediately Sparkle starts to rotate to get underneath the Shock. And I don't know where Proper went, because he was on that side, and I guess, like, Sparkle just walked past him, because then Sparkle comes out this door and says, "Hi, Kilo," and just murders his face. And this, like, sets off a chain reaction, effectively, because then Violet peels for Kilo, gets picked by Edison, I believe. Yeah, gets picked by Edison because, again, Violet bounces around, exposes his cranium. And Fielder, fucking my brain's just, Finn gets booped off the map by Fielder. Also, because he gets forced out of position during this entire engagement. Like, the amount of chaos that Sparkle is able to just create in the backline of the Shock just by walking past them throughout this entire match, it causes so many problems across the board. And I just, again, I feel like there was just a lot of communication problems going on basically the entire match.
Yeah, I also think that this is another one of those opportunities where, as much as I want to just point to communication issues from Shock, I think that there's a lot to credit Dallas with here.
100%.
Specifically in the compositional difference and the ability to knock back the Genji, right? Like, that's one of your big differences between Ashe and Sojourn. Sojourn has a movement ability to run from the Genji. Ashe can displace the Genji if he jumps in. And I think one of the ways that Proper typically really excels is by, I mean, Proper's an incredible Genji, is an incredible Overwatch player, but by just pestering the shit out of the back line and the mid line. And I think that Proper wasn't able to do as much of that because both Fielder and Edison could push him back. That caused Proper to not require Sparkle to peel back for his supports and instead just let Sparkle run wild over the Shock backline.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely an accurate assessment. Like, that's the one thing. Like, it cannot be stated enough how well Dallas just generally played in this match in general. They were able to capitalize on the mistakes of the Shock just very, like, almost instantaneously, and the credit goes largely to them as well for seeing the mistakes and the weaknesses as early as they did. I'm gonna just back it up for a second and just show off this. Oh God, why did you do that? No, I didn't ask you to do that.
Oh no!
It backed up.
No.
It backed up all the way. I just wanted to show off the little helicopter moment because what? Oh God! It's just.
Are you in a different game?
What happened? Why?
How did that happen?
Why? Okay. Anyway, we're back. And we're back. And we're back. And we're back. 1440 is where I wanted to be when all that happened. Man.
Is this the Hanbin helicopter?
It's the Hanbin helicopter, is what it is.
I love the Hanbin helicopter. This is so goddamn silly.
Oh, and I at first I thought it was like a glitch in Overwatch 2 because there are still some bugs being sorted out in this patch because no matter what no matter the fact that the pros are playing on it, it is still a beta. And it was just a very, very silly moment and just a weird combination of events that allowed that to happen. Very silly, very funny. Love to see it. Ultimately, Shock lose this map and they go to 3 on Ilios. And then I want to talk about this third map because this is some of the craziest nonsense I have ever seen in the Overwatch League. Some background of this point. Going into this, the Shock pull off a Symmetra teleporter to gain forward advantage and some just some early like get to point stuff. Kilo plays the Symmetra, has to swap immediately. Kilo is the choice to do this because Kilo has the movement ability to gain ground back a lot faster. So now I want you to pay attention to what's going on in this overhead. All right, the Shock team are here. Kilo gets out of spawn, and we're rotating, and I think it cuts away very shortly after this. But I want to just talk about where, like, the team gap that's going on here, okay? Shock have almost full rotated to Cage across from the well. Most of Dallas is already at point, okay? So already we're talking about most of the movement effects of Symmetra being negated just by the fact that, like, Dallas is already there. I don't think, with a Lucio in play, I don't really think you need to do that. I don't. I think it's a risky play, and here's why. We're about to find out. So Shock do that thing that I was talking about earlier, where they over-rotate. We're already in Cage. a position I personally am not a fan of for teams anyway. I think it's a very weak position, and we're rotating, and Dallas, as you can sort of see from the outlines on your screen, is already most of the way through the other side of well. And this allows them to isolate Kilo and keep him in spawn. So now, the Shock, realizing that not their entire team is there, have kind of found themselves in a bit of a pickle. And they have to force position onto Dallas, and that puts them into this nice little tight space again. And guess who's there to clean up? That'd be Sparkle, Edison, and Hanbin. Now, Proper gets a pick onto Sparkle, and Kilo manages to find Edison in the 1v1, but the damage is pretty much already done. So, like, just by this one mistake, all of Dallas is able to get early point cap. And this is just like, again, another uncharacteristic mistake from teams of this high of a level. I would expect this from, like, New York. I would expect this from, like, half of APAC. But, like, this, to see a team that is, to this point, 20-0, like, it's insane. It's just, I don't know. There's nothing else to say. It's like, they weren't on. They weren't on. That's on them.
Yeah, definitely. And, like, I think that the idea of the Symmetra rollout is getting less and less beneficial, right? And especially in this meta, you said it, like, with a Lucio in play, you already have speed boost. We know that Shout stacks. Sure, you don't really want to burn Shout right out of spawn, but if you hit that cooldown right away, it'll be online by the first engagement.
Mm-hmm.
And if you stack Shout and Speed Boost, you're going to beat the best Symmetra rollout. You'll beat a triple blink Tracer on a Symmetra rollout with a stack of Speed Boost and commanding Shout. So I don't get Shock's play here from the very beginning, and I agree, it's uncharacteristic for sure. And when you rolled it back at the very beginning, you don't need to do this again, but when you were saying, like, oh, here's the Shock taking Cage, right at that moment, you can see Sparkle on the right side of the screen ignore all of San Francisco and wall climb to the high ground, and that must be when he sees Kilo is stuck in spawn, and that just breaks it all down. And I mean, again, like, Edison just starts feasting, and it really all goes to shit. So I think from minute one, from the initial rollout, Shock lost well, and they never really took it back.
No, and we're gonna watch the world's dumbest stagger right now, because it took me, this was another one that took me a while to figure out exactly what happened. So I paused a little too late here. Finn is coming back. Not Finn. Violet is coming back from spawn. They all are technically, but they are not pushing from spawn together. And this is kind of where I think it went wrong to begin with, right from the get-go. They didn't regroup properly. No pun intended. Proper and Kilo are over here on this building side, and this is kind of bizarre. So you have Finn coming up the staircase. Finn has line of sight right now to both Proper and Kilo. This should be, in theory, this should be a safe position, okay? No one currently is in sight line of Edison. Once Finn crests that staircase, he will be. Violet has a little bit more kind of going for him because he's bouncing off the walls. We'll talk about that in a second. But this dynamite from Edison is just brilliant. And Kilo's already taken some tick damage from, I think, maybe some shurikens from Sparkle. I can't really tell. It's hard for me to read who's all there because it's not the best pixel density. But Proper, you know, he catches the dynamite. He's taking tick damage. Kilo's already really low and is burning to death. Violet's coming up the staircase here, and I don't know where Finn went, so I'm gonna back up just a hair and try and find this. So Finn backs down the staircase because he sees the sight line, and now nobody's there to help Kilo. He's just burning to death. He's just burning to death. Violet's now beneath this tree, and because he crosses the path, Edison's able to just shoot him in the head. He crosses in front of Edison and get down Mr. President, to no avail, still manages to get both Kilo and Violet, and now no one's around to touch the point. And this is where it just kind of GG go next. GG go next.
Yeah, man.
And so I'm going to fast forward to map 2 because there's some more nonsense that just goes on. I think one of the overarching things that we just continue to see, like, Sparkle does such a great job. I said this earlier, but he does such a great job of just getting past the front line of the Shock. On Paraiso, or Paraiso, or I don't know how it's pronounced. Someone really has to sort that out between now and launch.
Lucio's map.
Right.
I'm calling it Lucio's map.
So we're going to talk about this very first engagement. Typically, you see teams hold this high ground here, facing spawn. They try to get some early just advantage on the poke. Usually, you'll have a sniper up here taking poke damage at the oncoming team. Shock ignore that entirely. They have decided to opt for this secondary bridge around the corner. I don't hate this, it's just a little obscure, because now you have Proper over on this side just kind of on his own, out of range of the entire team. That's not a big problem because he can dash back, but it does sort of split the team in a weird sort of way, and what's funny to me is it allows them to miss Sparkle, who has gone around. I missed it in the talking point, but he goes under that corner and nobody sees him do it. So now he gets to pressure Kilo off high ground for free. Violet's bouncing around. I don't love this play, and now Kilo's forced out of position. This is a good play by Sparkle. This is a good play by Dallas. Like, they're given a lot of free reign to play here, and I believe Shock actually end up winning this fight. Yeah, they do, because Proper pops off a little bit. And it's a reset for Dallas. But this is not the only time that they do that play. That happens like several more times. And if we skip forward like a minute, they get to basically do the same thing for free. All right, so Dallas here pushes underneath. Immediately, the shouts are out. And I forget who gets picked first here. Show it to me. Anyway, while it's playing, oh yeah, here we go. This is the rotation that I just don't understand, because Shock love this one too. When they start to lose ground to Dallas, they force themselves into this tiny little space, which, you know what that's really great for, Matt?
What's that?
Dynamite.
Yeah, it sure is.
Dynamite loves the tight space. Dynamite loves tight, close quarters, and that's an easy cleanup for Dallas. I just, again, it's like they have a playbook that they have been using exclusively to some success, and now this is the first time it has not worked, and they just don't know what to do about it.
Yeah, I mean, we've only had Paraiso out for 4 weeks now, and I'm sure that there was some scrimming before for pros, but it really feels like Shock have no game plan for this match. For this map, excuse me, because as soon as Dallas starts to take significant space, they all just fall straight back to point. And it's like, all right, play point. It kind of has the same feel as like Busan downtown, where you've got this point that's small and enclosed, but surrounded by high ground, or even kind of like Mecha Base. But it's so weird the way that Shock just like pull back, and as soon as they leave that secondary bridge position you were talking about, they're like, yeah, we die. I guess we just die. And they never really get it together. I think what we've seen this month for Paraiso is you either hold them at the bridges or you don't hold them. You either hold them at the bridge on point A or you don't hold. You either hold them on this bridge that's coming up right here in point B, or you don't hold, or you hold them at the bridge before the corner on point C, or you don't hold. Paraiso is all about the bridges, and there is sort of that elevated catwalk behind point A that I think we're starting to see a lot of teams like, okay, we've given up our first bridge position, fall back to the catwalk and kite point. It's like Shock haven't put that game plan together yet and just never really figured out what to do on this map.
Yeah, I do think like it does seem to me like they don't really know how to play this map, because I will say it is customary more or less at this point for teams to play high ground around first point when they have to fall back. They take all of the staircases and try to surround point rather than funnel into. I mean, you'll see some funneling into the bar down here in the corner. Maybe one person will go into fruit stand like Shock did entirely. But generally, you see a lot of teams try to maintain the high ground advantage, because then there are rooms that you can take hard cover in, and also you have the surrounding capability. They just sort of play this entire map like they've never played it before, and it's really, really strange, because then on point B, that entire lead up to the catwalk, you have all of that power position above the street on those apartments. You'll see Dallas on their defense actually hold kind of the wraparound on every, like, you'll see one of the fuel on almost every single building. And it's like, it's a really, really strong position to hold, because you have the drop down capability. You have more places to funnel in and out of, and it's way stronger to hold. Now, that being said, as the game plays in the background, Dallas cap B more or less without a struggle. Shock puts up a little bit more of a defense just before this proper stops, they stop Edison's blade without any real value. But then we get a really, really clean stagger, because Shock overstay their welcome in the fight. Another theme of the entire match. More on that later. I don't have a ton to talk about at this point, because Shock are just kind of getting rolled.
Yeah.
It doesn't really, like, it doesn't really stop from here. There is a moment I want to touch on, like, at the end of this point, because I'm trying to see if it's worth me, like, buffering this forward. Yeah, might as well. Oh, God. Another cleanup from Dallas, because Shock over-rotate. Themes.
Oh, this is that blown rally, too. Like,
yeah.
I don't understand. I'm watching it a little behind where you are, because I'm watching our stream, so you're probably a few seconds ahead of this. But, like, Finn pops a rally after, I think, Kaluge is already dead. Like, they're chasing Hanbin around a corner, and it all just falls to shit. Like, typically, the Shock's ult cycling is so good. And Finn and Violet just seemed off sync during this whole game.
Yeah, there weren't many moments in this match that I would say they really wasted ultimates. There were a handful. There were a handful across both teams, actually, that the ultimates got kind of used early. I don't hate the rally being used there, because Violet's beat is almost online, so they still have that to fall back on the next point, or towards the end of the final fight. But, like, yeah, it was not opportune. And again, it's these rotations are just bad. Like, they don't make sense. They go way too far, and then they're forced playing behind point while the point is still moving forward. It's really, really strange.
Right.
You know, again, I feel like, to me, it almost feels like an attempt at pace setting, but missing the mark. And
yeah,
I could be wrong about that being, like, that might not be the angle that they were trying to take, but, like, that's what it feels like from the outside looking in. Without more information, it's hard for me to tell. I do want to, like, make a note of, I paused the stream because it was, this was coming up here. But it looks almost like a C9, but this is another, like, brilliant, just Bob boop. Kilo does a pretty standard throw Bob at point to stop point, and Fielder just gets this excellent, like, boop to put Bob onto the back ledge here. So Bob can no longer contest. The Shock think that Bob made it. And I'm not happy, Bob. I'm not happy. They effectively C9 by accident, and it's not a C9 because it was just a really strong play by Fielder. Like, no, in that kind of chaos, no one's going to be able to tell where Bob is, especially with these speakers in the way. You can't see him. So Point just gets to waltz in for free while the fight is taking place over in this corner. So good on you, Fielder. Really great game sense there. Just, again, another one, just like, love to see it, or hate if you're a Shock fan.
It's not a C9, it's a B9. It's a Bob 9.
Bob 9. Let's see. Let's move forward. 36 minutes. So this is the first attack by the Shock. Is it? Is it the first attack? It is.
Yes.
It is the first attack. So, again, this is one of those where Dallas decided to hold a similar position to the Shock, but they take first catwalk, and Shock over-rotate underneath. They basically take Sparkle's approach, but keep going. And because they do this without getting any sort of pick or even contesting the high ground, Dallas gets to rotate in behind them for free. And guess what the Shock do? They take Fruit Stand. And guess what they do? They go into that room, and guess what's in that room waiting for them? Dynamite.
Dynamite. Sure is. Sure is. This is another one of those moments where, like, yeah, I get it. Go to point. But, like, don't go into the small room beside point. Go up the stairs or out the back alley or into the big room behind point. Don't go into the smallest room on point. It's bad. I mean, like, that is a bad rotational direction, and I will not hear arguments for otherwise. Rotating yourself into the food stand when you can get pincered by 2 doors is bad. It's bad. You shouldn't do it. It's bad.
And this is just like, this is so again, it's uncharacteristic of the Shock. They're playing so tightly close to, like, we never see that. They're 9 times out of 10, they are spread pretty consistently. And here they go. They do it again. What, 3 times in a row? Yeah, 3rd time's a charm, right? It's totally gonna work this time, right? And they've split themselves off. It's incredible. Like, they're giving up these fights for free, effectively. I mean, Kilo finds Sparkle, but Edison finds Clues. That's team fight. It's the higher up level you go in Overwatch, the tendency is to win the team fight first before going to point. Sometimes point is used as a positioning factor, like it's forcing the enemy team to react. It's a reactionary response kind of thing. But generally it is get some sort of pick advantage and win the team fight first before you go to point, because then it's way easier to clean up the objective after the fact. This is not that. This is completely, this is some quick play nonsense to some degree. Like, this is immediately just like play objective, play PTFO.
Yeah, dude, that's exactly what it is. It's just playing the objective, and that's kind of what it feels like. I guess, honestly, that's kind of what it feels like the Shock does against teams like Paris and New York or whatever. You know, like when they come out and know, listen, we're just here so we don't get fined. Like, they just play the objective and it's fine because they're really good at this game. But when you go up against somebody else in high-level Overwatch, like, you can't just stand on point and expect the other team to fall apart. It doesn't work that way. So, yeah. I mean, this map was rough for San Francisco. Control was like, oh man, like, Dallas has a hand in this. And Pereso was like, wow, is San Francisco going to get rolled today?
Yeah.
I think San Francisco might get rolled today.
Yeah, this was incredible. And then this moment coming up is really funny to me as well. This rotation, like, Hanbin jumps up here on this ledge with the entirety of the Shock coming towards him, all right? So they see him, okay? Because they need to see him because he needs to deal damage to finish getting his ultimate here. So they know he's up here, right? So he jumps up, he crosses the sight line. Kaluj and Kilo are already here taking pot shots up top. Hanbin has ultimate, all right? And Chakra are rotating, and like, oh, did nobody see Kaluj up there? Because he just spun. He just spun through your entire team. What is that? Is that a 5? It's a 4-man. That's a 4-man rampage. 4-man rampage. The only one who escapes it is Finn. And somehow, despite this, thank God the follow-up wasn't there. Because that was a great play by Hanbin, but nobody was there to capitalize on the fact that half of the team, or over half the Shock, were antied. So with 31 seconds to go, Shock survive. They managed to get the first couple of picks. They managed to cap point in overtime. And this is just like, it spirals out of control here. So they get the cleanup. They get point. Customarily, you would expect them to take, or to prepare for Dallas's attack. Dallas gives a masterclass on how to position for this point. They're taking up positions all around the alleyway. Look at this. Look at this spread. Look at this. You have fielder covering for Edison, who gets a shield and some range healing. You have Chio taking care of Sparkle and Hanbin. Anybody can drop at any time, at any point here as Shock rounds the corner. This is just good positioning. Straight up, no notes. Shock, by contrast, grouped up on point. Grouped up on point.
Play the objective. Everything
is,
will be fine if we play the objective.
What's crazy? It's like I used the Sisyphus metaphor earlier. It's the same thing. Like why you know that that Edison is playing the Ashe. You know that the Dynamite is free value if you are all hit by the Dynamite. Like, it is, you build that ultimate up. You build Bob up so quickly if you get an entire team in one Dynamite. That's easily 25% alt charge, easily. If not more. It's actually, I think it's more. I think it's like closer to...
it's 30.
It's 30 to 40 if you get an entire team burning. Like,
yeah.
Come on now.
It's massive. I mean, it's literally one of the quickest ult generation, like, mechanics in the game.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like, Shock is scattered. Shock is playing the objective when they're not scattered. Like, it's... Yeah, this map was bad.
We see one of two looks from them this entire match, and it's they're either grouped up together or they're spread thin. Like right here, they don't group up and they're not grouped up, and immediately they're overextended all across the board, and they're split up, and they can get isolated. They isolate themselves. It's rough. I'm gonna look at the notes here really quickly and see if there's anything else on this map that I really want to hit. I do. I want to hit... So, spoiler alert. Shock cap 0.3 with no extra time. So, it is tieable at the most. And so, Dallas gets to attack. They have a minute 19 to cap point. You know, this is very tieable. Should be very tieable. You would think it was tieable. Shock holding this really tight, close position that they did the very first point A hold. Little bit different. This time you have Kilo off to the side with Proper as well, which I don't... Oh, no, I lied. Nope, I was wrong. I'm wrong. There's Kilo, just hanging out in the same exact position. Proper in the exact same position. Hey, I wonder if Sparkle's going to do that thing that he did the first time around. Do you think Sparkle's going to do that thing he did the first time around? Yep, there he goes. And Kilo's off high ground. And now it's anybody's game. Kilo's dead because Sparkle got to bully him for free. And that, by the way, is basically point, because Kilo's dead, so this is now... Oh, look, we're funneling into Fruit Stand, because...
There it is. Here we go again. God damn, this is so dumb. Anytime I see a team come around that corner to point and take that hard left from their perspective, hard right from ours, it's like, what are you doing? This is such a bad idea.
I've just, like, watching that go over and over and over, just every single time, and it not work, and they don't change anything at all. It's astonishing. So we're gonna skip ahead now to Dorado. Let's see. Begin point A. Honestly, I'm gonna talk while this goes on in the background, because there's, weirdly, nothing much to talk about in regards to Dorado. This is standard high-level Overwatch. I'm actually going to skip ahead a little bit, because point A goes off without a hitch. It's a decent back and forth between both teams. Dallas managed to hold Shock to, I believe, like 2.5 minutes, maybe 2 minutes. They shed some 90 seconds off the clock or something like that, which is a solid point A defense. This is a notoriously difficult point to full hold on. Shock put on typical Shock things. They're like a slight return to form almost, where they set pace, they take better positions. Like this already going in through the choke is better, because they're not all grouped up in the choke point to get capitalized on. I don't really have a lot to say here. I watched this back and I went, this is some Overwatch-ass Overwatch.
Right, I think one of the big things to point out here is this is the first map that Kilo has spawned on Ashe. Kilo came out straight away on Ashe and put away Sojourn, which I really think is the biggest difference between these two teams in this game. Like, the value that Edison found on Ashe just so heavily outweighed the value that Kilo was ever had was ever able to have on Sojourn. I mean, think about it. We're through 2 full maps. When have we said the words overclock in today's podcast?
Right.
Not a single time. So, like, if you play 2 full maps on Sojourn and don't have a single overclock or rail shot that's, like, worth talking about, get off the hero, bud. And I'm glad that he did, because this map is the, spoiler, one map that Shock looked like the Shock on.
Yeah. And it's, yeah. I can't really add anything to that. Like, I'm trying to find something on that I might have missed on this point, but there's really nothing. You know, they played the way they're supposed to play. Both teams did, actually. This was not even the Dallas playing badly. This was just a good series of team fights back and forth that the Shock happened to win. You know, this is kind of what we expected for the entirety of the match. Something close, but someone had to win. You know, I don't have much more to add there, so I'm gonna keep skipping ahead, because once we hit point 3, the story, the narrative shifts a little bit, because now we have an actual, like, roll. like Shock get on steaming, and they roll Dallas at point 3, and that's really the only thing that I need to say. It's a very scrappy, or no, that's a different point in the notes. I'm now reading my notes because I can't remember specifically. Yeah, no, it was a snowball. It was a snowball, and that was it. Okay, so we go back into point 2, the circus. I might as well just let it play. I might as well let it play from here. Shock defense. Again, noticeably better. Guess what? They're taking high ground positions that are not all bunched up. No notes. It's what you're supposed to do. It's what you're supposed to do.
And again, on the defense, Kilo on Ash.
Yeah. And it's a good choice, especially with these longer sight lines on Dorado. They get launched off of this high ground over here. That's kind of to be expected, but both DPS kind of have the ways to get out of there. And they take up the choke. Pretty standard. Again, nothing crazy in the first part of the defense. Shock also managed to hold 90 seconds off of Dallas, which, again, solid first hold. Where things start to get a little kooky. 104.20, blaze it.
Heyo.
Here we go. So first point cap. Shock defense, not egregious, but it is kind of paper thin, as we have seen for most of the match as well. They do get 90 seconds, which is solid, but could be better. The minute that it does start to fall apart for them, it's gone. There's just the fight ends abruptly. Let's see. From this point on, as point 2 kind of progresses, things get a little scrappy. Notably, I'm like struggling here because I'm a little like
brain dead.
I wrote so many notes and now I'm kind of head empty, which is really funny.
All the thoughts are on paper. They're not in your brain anymore.
This is true. The fights. So, oh, yes. Okay. Now I remember what was going on here, because I have to like talk this out as it's going on in real time. All of the fights on point 2 are very, very long. Like, we see Dallas sort of inching the cart forward here, but like most of what's going on here is just like this high ground fight on the mission. Like, it's very, very scrappy. Like, everyone's just trying to get an upper edge, and so Proper and Sparkle are just like playing ring around the rosy with their teams. Chio manages to peel for Sparkle, and they get Proper in the pick, but like most of these fights just take 30-40 seconds, and this is just running down Dallas's time, and that plays a big factor later on. Kilo with the Bob to just sort of stall point and force Dallas to rotate around. But like, they just take so long because nobody's dying. Like, even the value that is being found, you can see here that they're pinging like left and right, trying to find everybody and try to prioritize targets. But like, now that the Shock have to back up, like, they're able to take height on both sides again and surround point, and it just wastes time. Like, I don't think that Dallas caps for another minute here. Am I wrong about that? No, yeah, they do not cap until like a minute later. So now they have 3.5 minutes in the time bank, and this is kind of where it all starts to fall apart for them. we start to notice like some patience that we haven't seen from the Shock the entire match. We get a master class in alt cycling, actually. Yes. Okay. Cool. So now we're kind of catching things up here. At 7:13, which is where I just started, Proper has had Blade for well over a minute at this point. So when I was talking about patience, Proper's waiting for this Blade to go on sale. He's just kind of looking for an opening, which he never really gets in this first fight. I don't think. Right? Yeah, no. He doesn't Blade here. And again, it's because these fights are just so scrappy. Like, I'm like kind of vamping here because I know I think he does ultimately Blade in this fight. Ha, puns. But I think it's, yeah, there it goes. He was like waiting for someone to be isolated, and it just never really happened because Dallas is taking a page out of Shock's book and clumping up, which is not the most tactically sound position. And then Sparkle, this is the big mistake, tries to be a hero and Blades in the same alleyway and just gets annihilated. Like, they see that and he's just gone. And this is just kind of where it falls flat for Dallas, because that was the mistake I think that lost them this map, because it was just a hair too early. If he had waited until the next fight, they probably would have been able to cap off of it. So I don't know. It's easy to, in hindsight, go, yeah, it's probably where it went wrong, but like, I'm not sure. But it gave Kaluge an opening to pull off this rampage right here, which gets nobody. It gets nobody. It was a zoning alt. What do you know? It was a zoning alt.
Yeah, right.
But it forces them out of the hallway, and it allows Shock to take power position. You know, I don't know. Like, I'm having a hard time talking about this match because like the Shock just played well. You know, like they played well. They did what they were supposed to. Dallas did their best on it as well. Like, there's nothing that really went noticeably wrong. Oh, there's the rampage. That was the good one.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. We said it at the top of the map. Like, this is Overwatch ass Overwatch, right?
Yep.
Like, I expected to see this map 4 or 5 times in this series, and we didn't. And that's why I think it's hard to analyze, because like Shock played like Shock, Dallas played like Dallas, Shock ended up winning the map. That's it, you know? And I think that there's not much to look at because honestly, this went the way that I expected it to go, and it's a lot more interesting to look at the things that didn't.
Yeah, it's easy. I mean, it's easier to just nitpick what went wrong when you talk about like how these matches go. It's easier to nitpick where things went wrong, and it's just, you know, when things go according to plan, it's just
yeah.
So you know what? With that, we're gonna go to map 4, because map 4 fucking awful, absolutely terrible.
You want to talk about a roll, man? This was a whole damn bakery.
Yeah, and there is a moment in this map where the Shock lost. And I will talk about that. Like, but there is a very definitive moment where they just lose. It starts out though. It does start out though looking good for the Shock. Absolutely, like, reminiscent of the previous map. This first engagement by the statue and by the train is excellent, because Shock managed to take position to the point where they force Dallas off this high ground. And it gives an opening. Like, it allows I forget who actually gets the pick, but Fielder is forced out of position and gets picked early, and it allows Shock the opening to just kind of capitalize, clean up, and get some ground early on. Like, very clean start. Yeah, Fielder goes low, and it's Proper who finds him. But yeah, like, this is like, this again, what's supposed to happen. This is what you're supposed to see teams do. They're supposed to force the positioning like that. It's just, yeah, no mistakes really, like, just good gameplay. So let me find the timestamp. Oh yeah, no, there's one other thing that happens first that, like, it's just good capitalization. So this next engagement is where Dallas rotates underneath the Shock. Right through the center, because in that last fight, someone on the Shock got picked off. I think it was Kilo, but Violet is taxiing him back, and Dallas takes this effort to try and cut them off, and they overextend. and it allows Chio to get picked by Kilo. And now, we got to put on the brakes and back it up. We got to back it up. We got to back it up. We're going to back up. Yep, we got to back up. And there's the team wipe. And it's just like, it's those little capitalizations, man. It's just, it's amazing how in this meta, like, it's easy to overextend.
Right, man. And I'm really interested to hear you talk specifically about the point that you feel like the Shock lost this
It's coming up.
Because I totally agree with you, man. Like, Shock looked really good. And they're creeping up on butt scratch number 1. Like,
they never
Dallas
get the butt scratch. They never get the butt scratch.
Like, they're coming up on it. Dallas hasn't even made it past the, like the first big curve on main. Like, and it's just, this is how, what's the line? Like, this is how the world ends, not with a bang, but with a wet fart and a sad towel or
something
whatever
like
line.
that.
Like, yeah, it's rough. So I'll pitch it to you, but I want to hear about where you feel like the Shock lose this
It's
game.
this fight. It is this fight. This is where they lose. Because, so I've paused it here for a reason. You have Dallas setting up on the far corner on their spawn side. You have Shock pushing towards the butt scratch, and theoretically, like, there is no way that they can get this because Dallas is already here. Like, they managed to get there fast enough. Like, there's no way that they can get this without a fight. But the problem is the way that Shock have set up to take this fight. I'm going to pause it and hopefully they show me a better angle. But in case they don't, I'll explain what's going on based on what's on screen here. Off to the right, Kilo is positioning himself sort of on an off angle facing the bot. The rest of the team is towards this bottom right corner, and CLINCHES is pushing the bot. Dallas is coming up through this high ground and is funneling in towards Kilo. I don't think they see him. But where this starts to go wrong is the primary engagement. So there were 5 ultimates, well, 4. There were 4 ultimates in the bank for San Francisco, and most have not come online for Dallas yet because they haven't gotten the value to build them. Shock, not necessarily incorrectly, invest nearly everything to try and get the butt scratch. And unfortunately, the one ultimate that Dallas did have online, the 2 that they had online, were Sparkle's Blade and Chio's Beat. Beat goes out early as soon as Kilo pops overclock. So Kilo can't find anything with it. Sparkle is buzzing around trying to find a pick. Chio gets low. Proper, incorrectly, blades. Now he manages to find Hanbin, but I think this was a mistake. I think it was way too early because Shock have already invested both support ultimates. Okay? They didn't need to. But somehow, with only Sparkle's Blade, they managed to draw out both support ults from the Shock. And this Blade is late. Like if anything, he should have done it. I mean, I understand like the logic behind it, right? I get the idea that now they've used Beat. Beat has subsided. There's an opening to use the Blade. But at this point, Dallas has already started to retreat the bot. Because the Shock were so split taking that fight, the idea being that, maybe if they get the first pick, they can push the bot towards the point during the fight. Dallas backed the bot up. They let it just keep going. They ignored some of the fight entirely. They used the shroud of that beat to kind of gain ground. And so now Shock are pushing their ultimates, trying to chase the bot. So this is where it goes wrong. Because now they've invested too much. And it's like, well, what do? Okay, we've got some picks. We've gone back and forth. This is winnable. They start to push onto Dallas, and they overstay their welcome. Okay, both Kilo and Proper are now coming back from spawn because they both get picked. Violet, Finn, and CLINCHES go in after the remainder of Dallas, trying to clean them up and hopefully flip the bot back. But this doesn't happen. They manage to stay alive, and now all of a sudden, Violet gets picked in that fight because in the confusion, and now they have to make the decision to just call the fight. All of Dallas has now had time to respawn. This throws off the entire rhythm of the rest of the match. Basically, everything that happens from here on out doesn't matter as much because the fight was lost there. The ult economy is thrown off. Dallas is in a better position to keep maintaining. And I honestly, I don't even feel the need to elaborate on the rest of this match or the rest of this map, because that's where Shock lost. Everything that happens after is them trying to play catch up, and because they blew everything on that one fight, now Dallas can just sort of cycle ultimates kind of cleanly and just continue to inch ground until eventually they're able to snowball into the finish.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on all counts. Like, there is certainly that overinvestment of ults there, and I think there is valid play calling in the sense that we've seen how important butt scratch is, right?
Yes.
Like, if you don't activate butt scratch and you go into overtime, you're in for a world of hurt. Like, the only way to really, and it's like a 3-goal lead in hockey or soccer or something else, right? Like, that's the point where you're like, we got butt scratch, we can play this defensively. I know I've bitched and moaned about Coliseum and how it's easier for teams to push bot to bridge and then just play that central ground. But on New Queen Street, if you don't get that first butt scratch, there's no reason for you to play defensively because your offense isn't over yet.
Right.
And I agree. I mean, like, Shock they played for it. It didn't work out, and they never got back up after they missed that butt scratch opportunity. And Dallas just keeps on moving.
Yep. You know, I can't even call the ultimate investment entirely a mistake, because the argument is there that you need to get it to the capture. Like, using all of those ultimates to secure the capture is not the part that I have the problem with. I have the problem with when they just keep the fight going 30, 40 seconds longer than they should have. You know, the minute that it didn't work, the minute that the fight didn't work and the bot started moving backwards, should have been a reset. That should have been reclaiming position, maybe regrouping in some way, giving up the space, or dying on point immediately. But the play call, it had to have probably come from Kaluj, because he was leading that charge. Like, the play call to push in and try and clean up what was left of Dallas was a huge mistake. And the second that it just didn't work, like, that set the tone for the rest of this map, because they could not recover from that, because they just stayed entirely too long. And it fed so much ult charge to Dallas as well. Like, it can't be understated how much catch up they were able to get off of that one miscall. So, like, you know, that's basically where it all went wrong. Everything else after that is negligible, because the rhythm was gone.
Yeah, I agree. And that, I think, pretty much wraps up our game of the week.
Yeah, that's basically all she wrote. I don't need to say, like, you know, I don't need to cover the full cap here. Everything else is, again, just kind of negligible at that point.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, hey, if you're ready, I'm ready to move on to some Preds and rankings.
Yeah, we have the showdown coming up this week. And do you want to start with the East, because it's going to take less time?
Yeah, I'm good to start there. Before we jump in, I wrote some things. I want to read them. Canada will host their first Overwatch League tournament as the Summer Showdown kicks off in Toronto on Thursday the 8th. 8 teams from NA and 4 from APAC have made the tournament. We're going to talk about the first round. Before we do, let's talk about our Pred record from last week. After last week's games, Brad sits at 15-6. I sit at 12-9. Why do I sit at 12-9? Because I missed 5 consecutive games, Brad. I missed 5 consecutive. It's my longest losing streak since I started doing pick'ems. I'm mad about it. I missed Spark Fusion, Dragons Dynasty, Toronto, London, New York, Florida, and then that all started on Saturday, the last game, when I missed Boston, Vancouver. So I missed 5 goddamn games in a row.
Didn't you also call Atlanta and LA?
Did I? Yes. I mean, I missed other games over the weekend.
You're just talking about the streak.
My streak of losing the last 5 games that were played this weekend. Yeah, I missed, Jesus Christ, 2 on Friday in the West, one on Friday in the East and one on Saturday in the East. It was a bad weekend for me.
So that's what went wrong, because I looked at the scores of our leaderboard and I was very pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, I've been ahead this whole time. And
for those listening, 2 of my pick'ems at the beginning of the weekend didn't save. My two first APAC games, I might as well have called wrong because they didn't save, so I did not get points for them. So somehow, because of some last-minute tweaking based on things that people were doing, I came out ahead.
Yeah, so congratulations, Brad. Now, the real question, did we beat our friend's dumb brackets that we've been talking about? Brad beat the shit out of our friend's dumb brackets, and I, by 1 point, beat the brackets. So I'm still above. I haven't lost to the algorithm yet.
Nature is healing.
Yeah, I'm really upset about it. Anyway, let's move on. Go ahead. We can do the East first.
All right. So because of Overwatch's back end being not the best, there is the Pick'ems bracket went up literally minutes before we started the stream, so I did not have the time to make the window look pretty or even begin to think about how I wanted to call this. So we're going to go about this a little bit differently. We're going to talk about the teams that made it in to the bracket. We're going to talk about kind of our expected outcome, and we're going to talk about kind of where we went wrong in how things played out last weekend, because boy, there were some wild things that happened, but we'll get to that. We're going to start in the East because the East is a mess and makes no sense, and yeah. We have Shanghai Dragons going up against the Guangzhou Charge, and Philadelphia and Seoul in the first. This is gonna be. Oh my god, this is gonna be. There is no way that this doesn't play out the way we expect it to. There's no way.
Right.
There's no way. So
what I'm saying.
So give me your thoughts. Let's start Shanghai Dragons and Charge.
I don't care how hard Jimmy fucks. Jimmy doesn't fuck harder than the Shanghai Dragons.
No.
Period.
There is
no way Guangzhou beats Shanghai Dragons.
Yeah.
Put it down. Here's the edit this week. If Guangzhou beats Shanghai,
I'll make a
Brad
note of that. I'll make a note of that.
do something. I don't know, but like there is no way Jimmy outfucks the Shanghai Dragons. I refuse to believe it.
There is no I don't have anything to add. Jimmy doesn't fuck hard enough for that. Which also leads me to Seoul and Philadelphia. Like, there's no way that Philadelphia wins that. Like,
no.
There's next to no shot.
Like, I think there's more of a chance that Philly beats Seoul than Guangzhou beats Shanghai. And by more, I still mean none. Seoul wins that game. Seoul wins that game for sure.
So we'll pause for a second to talk about Philadelphia, because Philadelphia was the big swing this weekend, right? Like we were talking about this. I told you a couple days ago that I had changed something up last minute with this, because Philadelphia finally decided to start playing MN3 on the Ash roll instead of Carpe. And
yeah, right.
Like it's the thing that they should have been doing all tournament. And lo and behold, as we've seen a couple of times with other teams, one player was the difference maker, and Philly started to win. Like, they have lost most of their games this entire stage, and all of a sudden this weekend, they pulled into the tournament because they won both games. Unexpected to us. Like I said, at the last minute, I changed my Philly Spark pick because I saw that they were playing Carpe, and I was like, well, there's no way then that they lose this. So, like, Philly... You know, they look better, but they should not beat Seoul. That should not be the one thing that changes that for that matchup. Which means, you know, Shanghai and Seoul will go up against each other probably twice. If we're being realistic. In the double elimination side of things, most likely Philly and Seoul will be in the grand finals. Seoul lost. Wait, did I say Philly and Seoul? I did say Philly and Seoul. Shanghai and Seoul will most likely be in the grand finals. Most likely Shanghai and Seoul will play each other twice. So we saw Shanghai booty bop Seoul yesterday.
Did you watch that game? I haven't watched that game yet.
I watched a little bit of it. I have not had a chance to watch all of it yet. I have similar thoughts on this game that I have to the Shock Dallas match. And I have similar thoughts going forward that I will expand upon later, but I think, all things considered, I still like Seoul for this tournament. I think the loss going into the tournament is sort of indicative that they will probably outperform during the tournament. I'm not gonna like stand here and say that's definitive. I actually have more faith in the Shock in the West bracket than I do in Seoul currently. I am probably still gonna give it to Seoul when I fill out my bracket. I think no matter what happens, they're gonna play Shanghai twice this tournament. And I think when they do, they're gonna lose the first one, and I think they're gonna win the second. And I think they're gonna win the whole thing. I think it's gonna take them that long to sort of sort it out, but I think Seoul wins this.
So give me then your map score. So I have written down, and I assume that it's correct, both of us think the grand finals of APAC will be Shanghai and Seoul. Yes?
Yes.
Okay. What is your map call for Shanghai Seoul? The grand finals is 1st to 4.
Right. I'm going to say Seoul 4-2.
All right. I think Shanghai 4-1.
Ooh.
I agree
spicy.
with everything you said except for the part about Seoul beating Shanghai. Here's my thoughts on the Shanghai Dragons. For as long as I've been watching Overwatch League, which, you know, to my credit, is only a couple of years, the only thing I've known about the APAC division is that Shanghai's the best team. And as I've watched Overwatch League, what I've learned is that Shanghai tends not to be the best team until the last 40% of the season. And here we are. And they just 3-0'd Seoul, and I think that Shanghai is heating up, and I think that we're going to get back to the undefeatable Shanghai Dragons until they play any teams in the West and get popped. But I'm calling Shanghai 4-1 for APAC Grand Finals.
I think once we get to the Seoul Shanghai portion of this tournament, it's going to be just a series of bangers. I think I don't think Seoul like, regardless of the outcome, I don't think Seoul gets booty bopped, or I don't think Shanghai does either. I think regardless of the outcome, we're going to see like a series of lengthy games when it gets to those two. So
yeah,
you know, that's pretty cool. So like that wraps up the East because the East is quick.
Yeah, let's do the West, man. Let's talk about first round for the West here, and then we can talk a bit about expectations going forward, because I think that the first round, at least in my brain, is pretty clean cut. I'll start off. I don't see Washington beating Dallas.
No.
I don't see Vancouver beating San Francisco.
No. That's I have no, there's nothing to expand upon there. That's pretty much a definite.
Right. We did just see London beat Toronto,
which was a surprise, and
it was a surprise.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. I was just gonna say, we saw Florida win out the weekend against NYXL. Houston's been Houstonable. I don't really know about that game, so I think we can both agree on Dallas, San Francisco. But what are your thoughts on London, Toronto, and Florida, Houston?
So I'm going to start with Florida and Houston. I don't think Florida wins this. I don't think it's even close. I think Houston has looked substantially better, and at least the last 2 weeks have looked substantially more consistent. I'm going to say probably that game ends up being pretty cut and dry. Probably Houston 3-1 at the most. I don't see Florida gaining the foothold that they need against Houston. They just don't have the firepower. They really don't. Dante's looked really good. Lep has been a huge factor for Houston, and Merritt, it just needs to be paid more.
Merritt's a freak, dude. Merritt's so good at Overwatch. What the fuck?
The Merritt Pelican duo has been so strong, and like Florida sure has like these weird comps that they've been playing out, but like it only briefly worked against Dallas, and that only ended up being a 3-1. Like,
yeah,
I don't see a scenario where Florida wins that. Obviously, Houston, I don't have the most faith in, but I will say I have more faith in them this week than I've had in them in a long time. So, like, I don't have a lot to say about that. I am much more uncertain about London, Toronto.
Yeah. So just to cap off Houston, Florida, I agree with you. I think Houston wins this game. However, I think Houston either wins it 3-0 or they get reverse swept.
Interesting.
I think that they either win this outright or it's fully Houstonable. And I don't have any faith in Mayhem going any farther than that if they would beat Houston. And if Houston goes to the lowers, I would kind of expect Houston to win out at least a round or two. I'm calling Houston 3-0. I think Houston comes out and just like womps on Florida for 3 maps and we call it a day. Is there a chance that Florida backs them up against the wall? Sure, but I think Houston wins that pretty quick.
Fair enough. Let's talk about London, Toronto. You were not in the chat yesterday as I was raving about this game.
No, I was not.
I was ranting my brains out about this because by every measure, London should not have won that game. And that's why I have a problem calling this one, because there's entirely a possibility where that happens again. If London cleans up their act and plays even better than they did yesterday, they win, and it makes no sense to anybody why. But, like, Toronto didn't look great yesterday, but they still, even despite losing, looked better than London. I really, like, if we hadn't, if I hadn't, I say we, I was the one who said we're doing Shock Dallas this week. If I hadn't called that so early in the weekend because I was so angry about that game, I would have picked this one because I was so angry about that game.
Yeah, I think London looked better against Toronto yesterday than they have looked for like 2 weeks. I also am having a really hard time with this one. I don't think that you can discount home field advantage for Toronto. I think that that's going to be pretty awesome for them. And I think that London has been hit or miss in this meta, just straight up. Sometimes they look good. Sometimes they look like dog balls. I think that London, my personal thought is that whoever loses this match is primed for a real good run through the losers bracket.
That's fair.
But I don't know who it's gonna be. There is part of me that wants to say London because Toronto is the type of team that loses to a team once and gets really tilted. There is also part of me that wants to say Toronto because they're in Canada and home field advantage isn't nothing.
Correct.
So I don't know. I will leave it to you to make the first call here. I'm really not sure.
I don't know. I am inclined to give it to London because the other thing that we have to factor in is that the losing teams get to choose their maps, and I think no matter what, I think this one might go to 5. And I think London will thrive because their map pool for the game that they won yesterday did not favor them. Because they didn't get a chance to play the May that they look better on.
Right, yeah, they didn't play any Froyotes.
And so every time
it's gonna happen.
Gonna ram jam it into every single episode. But no, they didn't get a chance to play May, and they always look better on that. And if they can win against Toronto on maps that they are not favored on, and they weren't favored in the entire match, so like if they can win in those conditions, looking as kind of weak as they did, I'm more inclined to give it to London because that gives them the competitive edge going into this rematch. Now, you know, Toronto's home field, Toronto's going to be annoyed. It's LAN, that probably has a factor to play. There's so many things, but I think for my money right now, I'm going to go with London. When I fill out my bracket, I may change my mind, but in this live recording, I think I like London for this.
Yeah, man, I also might change this in my bracket, and I literally just changed it in front of me. I'm going to go with Toronto.
Yeah.
Partially just to disagree with you, but partially because I'm going to give the boon of home field advantage to Toronto.
Fair enough.
And see what happens. Also, I saw on Twitter that Lemon Kiwi and Leg Day have said that they need to call this match for the culture, with Kiwi being from Canada and Leg Day being from London. So I would like to also put forward that if the gods of Overwatch are listening, and by that I mean the nerds at Blizzard. For the culture, let Leg Day and Lemon Kiwi call this match.
Fair enough. Yeah. I'm here for that. All
right. So I want to talk about who you expect to be in the finals. Now, what's interesting about this tournament, unlike kickoff or midseason, is that there's no reseeding in this tournament. You're just going straight down the bracket. So assuming that Dallas wins, London or Toronto is playing Dallas. I don't know. I don't have a lot of faith in London or Toronto against Dallas. I also don't have a lot of faith in Vancouver against San Francisco or Florida or Houston against San Francisco, right?
So let's look at it this way, okay? I think let's just talk about who. Let's get it out of the way right now. It should be, pending something absolutely insane, it should be San Francisco and Dallas in the grand finals. Let's just skip ahead to grand finals, because I don't think there is a scenario where either of these two teams loses both in the upper bracket and in the lower bracket. I think there is a half-decent chance that San Francisco could lose to Houston, but I do not think they will lose in the lower bracket if that happens. So I think, end of the day, top two teams still stand, San Francisco and Dallas, because I think those two teams are in a completely different plane than the rest of the bracket.
So here's my concern, right? I agree with you. There is no doubt in my mind right now that the winners round 3 game on Saturday, September 10th, the one that's up and left from your mouse right now,
yes,
is going to be Dallas, San Francisco.
Okay.
I have no doubt that that game is Dallas, San Francisco, which sends one of them to the losers bracket.
Correct.
I think that there is a chance that one of those teams could lose to a team streaking through the losers bracket. And that's the only way that I see this happening and giving us a grand final that isn't Shock Dallas. Because I agree with you. Looking at this on paper, there's no way it's not Shock Dallas.
So then let's look at it this way. Who's the underdog in the losers? Who's the one that's going to make the best lower bracket run? Because we're already looking at 4 teams that are going to drop down immediately, and we know pretty handily, with the exception of one match, the most likely candidates. Who are we looking at making the big lower bracket underdog run? Yeah.
Toronto.
You think?
So here's the way I could see this happening. And I'm not ready to like plant my flag here, but
right.
Let me walk you through this, right? Toronto loses in the first or second round. They either lose to London again, which is possible. If they beat London, I think they lose to Dallas.
Okay.
Cool. London gets sent to lowers. Let's just assume, Toronto gets sent to lowers. Let's just assume that Toronto goes streaking through lowers and plays great.
Okay.
Cool. From there, Dallas has beaten Toronto and moves on to play San Francisco. Let's say in that game, San Francisco is like, fuck you, Dallas. We're not falling for that shit again, and beats the hell out of Dallas, and sends a beaten and broken Dallas to a losers game against a war-hardened and streaking hot Toronto. I take Toronto in that game. And that gives us Toronto, San Francisco in the grand finals.
Okay.
Which is a game I think San Francisco wins, without a doubt in my mind. But I think in my head, grand finals is either Dallas, San Francisco, or it's San Francisco, Toronto.
Okay. I'm fine with that. So regardless, you think San Francisco's making it the whole way to the finals no matter what?
I do, and I think that because of 2 reasons. Reason number 1 is I don't think that Houston can beat San Francisco.
Okay.
Thing number 2, I don't think San Francisco loses in the lower bracket. Dallas is the type of team that gets tilted and gets caught on losing streaks. San Francisco is not that team. I think if San Francisco ends up in the lowers bracket, they'll win their way through it.
So, okay, and then that brings me to the follow-up question. Does that mean you think San Francisco takes the whole thing this time?
It feels that way to me. It really does. You know, on paper, like, the only team on here that I have faith in beating San Francisco is Dallas. That's it. And to be honest, I don't have a lot of faith in them doing it twice. Dallas has lost a lot more games this season than the Shock have. I know Dallas has been undefeated in this phase, and they're really good on this meta, but I don't think their tournament presence gives a lot of weight to that.
Okay, so then my follow-up question, because I wanted to talk about this a little bit, and I had some thoughts that were relative to like when we talked about the East bracket and the showings. You don't think then that the Shock showing against Dallas this weekend is going to have an impact going into this tournament?
I don't, because I think that Shock are going to be pissed.
Okay.
I think Shock are going to come out swinging. I don't know that there's a better coach in Overwatch than Krusty. Straight up. I mean, just like to call it what it is. I think that as far as long-term coaches go, Krusty is one of the best. And I think that a team that lost the game that we just broke down, which was against a good Dallas, but came with a lot of Shock mistakes, that's going into the locker room with Krusty is not going to come out of that locker room physically capable of losing to Dallas a second time.
Okay, I like that entirely, because I kind of, those are pretty much my thoughts as well. Like, that's basically what I was going to say, because, like, I think, you know, we've seen the Shockmen be so dominant leading into the tournaments and then put up a kind of a subpar tournament fight. This is one of those where it's like they're going in kind of as the question mark for a change, and I feel like that's going to light the fire under their ass that sends them kind of the whole way this time around. I'm hoping that's the case, obviously, because I'm a Shock fan, but, like, I don't see a scenario where they don't make grand finals, and I see this being their best chance thus far of actually taking home a tournament win, and hopefully setting a stage for, you know, the Countdown Cup and the grand finals altogether. So
yeah, I mean, I agree. As not a Shock fan, like, I totally agree with you. I think that the Shock play better when they are not favored. The Shock are favored a lot, and I think that causes them to play sloppy. And teams that get cocky play shitty Overwatch, and that's what happened against Dallas this weekend.
Yeah.
So I have more faith. I have more faith in the Shock because they lost to Dallas than I would have if they beat Dallas this weekend.
100%, actually. That's my thoughts entirely. I don't have anything else to add.
So let me ask you this, just to cap off our show notes. For the fun of it, for the lulz, I'm calling the grand final as San Francisco-Toronto. Do you want to call San Francisco-Dallas? Who do you think the second team is?
I am going to call San Francisco-Dallas. I do. I think that I do like the Toronto-Dallas losers round match, but I still think in that circumstance Toronto comes up short. I just don't think, I don't know. There is a world where they lose, but, like, if they show up looking half as good as they did on Friday against the Shock, like, I don't see a world in which they lose to Toronto. Because Toronto has shown some serious vulnerability as well, obviously, against London, and I could pick out half a dozen things that they did wrong, that doing them wrong against London was detrimental. Doing them wrong against Dallas is absolutely a nail in the coffin. So, like, that's kind of where I'm sitting. Obviously, things are subject to change. There's no way we could possibly predict this perfectly. I'm saying that into the ethos. Yeah. I'm saying that into the ethos so that one of us wins a lot of money. You know, it's a little bit of reverse psychology, but I think, I think it's gonna be a Shock Dallas final. I really do.
How many maps? Give it to me. What's the map called?
God. In this world, they will have played each other twice in this bracket. So second time's the charm. I like Shock for that 4-1.
Got it. All right, so I have Shock 4-1 over Toronto. Brad, you have Shock 4-1 over Dallas. I think that pretty much wraps up the show. You got anything else for us?
Not really. I think the only thing that we should touch upon is the LA Gladiators noticeably missing from this bracket for the first time in a while, and man, it was looking real good for them for a hot second until London pulled off that second map win.
You know what? We almost got through a whole podcast without even saying LA Gladiators one time. We almost did it. We were that close. But yeah, I mean, hey, they're not here. I think that it would have been a fun story, but a cop-out if they made it into this tournament.
Yep.
I'm glad they didn't make it.
Narrative.
Yeah, you know what? I'm really happy that they started playing players worth playing. Sorry, Reiner, but your Junker Queen looks like dog balls. I'm glad they put Space in. He's a better team captain. Period.
Doesn't play like a rookie.
That's what LA needs.
Doesn't play like a
LA
rookie.
needs a team captain. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, that pretty much caps it off. I had to throw in the obligatory. We had to say you got to throw in frozen yogurts.
Yeah, there it is.
You got to crowbar that into the conversation. So I'm going to talk about the LA Gladiators for a second. That's fine. Seems like fair trade.
Yeah. Well, that will do it for this episode of Spectator Diff. Again,
Indeed.
Please subscribe to us here on YouTube, or if you're listening to the audio of our show, subscribe on your podcast app of choice. Spectator Diff Nation, here's your task for the week. We are 38 individual listeners away from unlocking cool things on our podcast hosts. So if you wanted to be cool, corner 38 of your friends and make them listen to us specifically on Spotify. I'm not going to tell you what that is, but if you do it, I'll tell you what happens. Anyway, you can follow me on socials at MC_DJ_MC.
And me on socials at LastCall_Gaming.
And until next time, just remember, we're better at watching Overwatch than you.
GG's, everybody.